Hi there, this is Ed Ingham, and I run the investing group Haggerston BioHealth on Seeking Alpha. And in this video, I'm going to show you my approach to researching a new stock using some of the functionality that's provided by the Seeking Alpha premium site. So without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, I'm just on the Seeking Alpha homepage here. So if I want to really do a kind of due diligence deep dive on a stock, there are actually 6 tabs that I look to open. And I'm going to use the ticker CRSP, which is CRISPR Therapeutics, which is one of my favorite biotech stocks. So I often look at this one. But anyway, this is how I proceed. So I'll start off by searching for CRISPR, and I want to open six tabs as mentioned. So this is kind of quite hardcore due diligence. It's not the most thrilling approach, but it's really helpful, and I'll explain why as I go. And this is part of what my service provides. So anyway, we've got 3 there, 4, 5, and 6. So the first thing I always like to look at is transcripts and insights. So this will be things like earnings calls, if they do a presentation at a healthcare conference, and there are numerous healthcare conferences that take place over the year. And I always think if you want to find out about a company, the very good place to start is by listening to the company itself. So for example, here, we can look at a CRISPR Therapeutics transcript from their appearance at the City 2026 Virtual Oncology Leadership Summit. So first of all, I'm going to open that. Then I'm going to look at something a bit more practical, which is numbers and figures. So for that, I want to open up their most recent earnings press release, so which Seeking Alpha very helpfully provides. So as we can see here, we've got all the information. So you have things like business updates for commercialized products and pipeline products, and then further down you'll look at R&D spending, SG&A, etc., and so on, and then you'll get the actual figures themselves right at the bottom here. So you've got your balance sheet, your income statement, and your cash flow statement. So the next one is I want to look at the SEC filings, and I want to look at either the 10Q or the 10K filings. The 10Q is quarterly, the 10K is annual, and usually contains a lot of important information. So obviously you probably won't find a company listing all the bad things about themselves during a transcript. That'll probably be a very bullish presentation, but actually in the 10K they are obliged to list all the risks to the business. So it's a very helpful place to look at their assessment of what the risks facing their company are, and also their competition as well, which some companies go into a lot of detail, and that can be very useful because obviously CRISPR Therapeutics, for example, doesn't develop drugs in a vacuum. It'll have a lot of competitors, so it's very helpful to know about those competitors, what they're doing, and if they actually represent a better investment opportunity. So the 5th tab I'm going to leave like this, because this is where I go through recent news. So I'll come down here and I'll be able to look at all the news, which is very helpfully collected by CRISPR all in one place. So if I want to say cover, okay, what's been happening for the last year or so, all the major catalysts will probably be listed here, and lots of other things, analyst ratings, breaking news, earnings releases, etc., and so on. And then I want to look at the financials. So I bring this up on the Seeking Alpha site. Now, CRISPR is not a company that earns a lot of commercial revenue yet, but as you can see here, we've got all the balance sheets, and just for example, you can see that CRISPR has a very high cash burn, so it's losing almost, over 500 million last year, which is quite a sizable sum. And there's the balance sheet, obviously, there, and the cash flow I can look at as well. And the final sheet will be my most recent analysis of the stock. So I will then open this up, and as you can see, I gave it a buy rating in January, and stock is up just about 12% since. So this is how I normally, if I'm doing a piece of research, if I'm doing a post for subscribers, this is all the stuff I want to look at, so I can read my last thesis and discover, remind myself of the reasons why I gave it a buy rating. So I can scroll through this, and it'll also have useful links such as CRISPR's pipeline. So I will read this, and then I'll probably go to the transcript and see if it's what date it is. So this is February the 18th, so it's obviously more recent than the last coverage I provided. So These I do find very useful. They're extremely well copied by Seeking Alpha as well. Very few mistakes. So you really get a sense of what the company is all about and what the near term catalysts are, what they want to do long term, and you get to hear from the CEO, who in the case of CRISPR is a very charismatic long term CEO who's done a great job in my opinion. So you can see here he's going to talk about all of the most recent products such as the CAR T cell therapies, probably the in vivo products as well, and probably go into a bit of sort of hardcore detail into how they achieve knocking out specific genes and why it's different to other companies. So that's a great place to kind of start. So you update yourself with what management's most recent thoughts on the company are. This is really just it can often be you're looking for sort of concise ways to understand data, so that there's obviously hundreds and hundreds of pages in any 10K and 10Q, but this will list highlights and upcoming catalysts, etc. So when is the next clinical stage trial result? And then here you actually have the revenues they've generated from their commercial asset Casgevy, which is a cell therapy indicated for sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. So you can see there that they've earned recent revenue, and here this is you'll get a very thorough description of the business, which will really dig deep into the science and explain how the product works, all of the studies that it's been to before. So if this is not going to be a quick overview, but it will be an in-depth overview. So this is once you've familiarized yourself with the most recent developments of the company and stuff, and it's always good to understand the science in as much detail as you can, and you read and reread and reread, and eventually you can you gain a lot of insight and information from that. Now, recent news we might look at. So, for example, this heart disease therapy they're looking at, and it's a very exciting area of development. So it's an in vivo gene editing therapy. So you could go to your doctor's office, have one single injection, and theoretically be cured of, for example, low cholesterol for the rest of your life, which is obviously an incredible thing. And CRISPR and a few other companies are actually getting quite close to making that reality. So it's always really interesting just to look through these, and you can also see news from the FDA. So what are the regulatory authorities doing? What kind of movements are they making? There's a quote here from Vinay Prasad, who many people know as sort of recently joined the FDA and has a different approach to gene therapy than what's been expanded in the past. So you go through this to familiarize yourself. And again, if anything's been missed out and the CEOs talked about it in my last article, I'll be able to pick it up here. And then, finally, obviously, companies need to be funded. So, you need to understand, how much money does this company get through a year? So, for example, CRISPR will probably have $1 billion, more than $1 billion of cash on its balance sheet. As we can see here, so it's got total cash investments of nearly $2 billion. So that makes the sort of 500 million per annum cash burn seem more palatable, so that they have got the funding to spend that kind of money. And you can then flip back and see, well, have they raised any money recently, and go back through the headlines to see when they last did an at the market share offering. So essentially, by working through all these 6 different tabs, there's so much information there that you can pick up on the company. You're very unlikely to miss much. You might also find in these transcript section, quite often there will be a presentation. In this case, I don't see one, but you can see obviously how many times they talk to investment companies over the course of the year, and how much sort of trying to generate interest in their company, etc., and so on. So yeah, this is very useful. If there is a presentation there, obviously it's good to be able to see things visually represented as well. And I think it's helpful when you find, for example, a description in the 10K of a particular study design in written format, and then you can also find that in the presentation as well. So you really know that you're fully up to speed, and you have a powerful understanding of the stock, and that's really what you're looking to do. And then you can read the transcript and see whether you agree with the CEO or whether you don't agree with the CEO on, the possibility of the timings around the next drug approval, etc. And you can go back to my own thesis in my case and rewrite certain elements. And that's really where I'll start out investigating a company. There are other resources that you want to use on Seeking Alpha as well, to search for stocks in the first place, to set up screeners, etc. But this is quite a nerdy deep dive into all the different information that I'll look at when I'm compiling my research in a company. It's fantastic to find it all in one place. So it's definitely a big help for me, and I hope that's given you some insight into how I prepare my analysis, and perhaps it's something that you might find useful for yourselves in the future. So thanks for watching.